air. It was one of the coldest nights of the year. And David pulled his worn coat tighter around his shoulders as he walked home. His boots crunched on the frozen ground, and his breath came out in white clouds. David was a poor single father. He lived in a small, old house at the edge of town with his 8-year-old son, Eli. Life was never easy for them. David worked long hours in a repair shop, fixing whatever he could for a little money. Most nights, he came home tired, his hands rough from work. But tonight, he just wanted to get home, light the small heater, and sit with Eli. As he reached his street, he noticed something unusual there. By his doorstep was a small figure sitting on the ground. She was curled up tightly, hugging her knees to her chest. Her thin clothes looked more suited for summer than for the freezing night. Her hair was messy, her face pale, and she shivered with every gust of wind. David stopped a few steps away. His first thought was concern. Who would leave a child out here in this weather? He called out softly, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were wide and cautious, like she wasn't sure if he was safe. Eli appeared in the doorway, holding onto the frame. "Dad, who is she?" he asked. David didn't know, but he knew one thing: he couldn't leave her outside. He walked closer, crouching down so his voice would be gentle. "It's freezing out here. You'll get sick. Come inside, just for tonight." The girl didn't move at first. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I don't want to cause trouble." David shook his head. "No trouble, kid. Come on, it's too cold." She hesitated, then slowly stood up. Her legs looked weak, like she hadn't eaten well in days. David held the door open, letting the warm air from inside wrap around her. She stepped in, her eyes scanning the small but tidy home. Inside, the heater hummed softly in the corner. Eli moved aside to give her space. David gently closed the door behind them, locking out the biting cold. "What's your name?" he asked as he took off his coat. The girl looked down at her hands and murmured, "Lena." David nodded. "Okay, Lena, you can sit here." He pulled out a chair near the heater. She sat carefully, as if she didn't want to damage anything. David went to the kitchen and returned with a steaming bowl of soup. "Eat," he said simply. Lena stared at it for a moment, then began to eat slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the spoon. She didn't slurp or spill. She ate like someone who had learned to make food last as long as possible. Eli watched her from across the table, his young mind full of questions. "Where do you live?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "Nowhere," she said softly. David glanced at her but didn't push. Something in her voice told him the truth was heavy. After dinner, David gave her a blanket. "You can sleep here in the living room," he said, pointing to the couch. Lena hesitated. "Just for one night?" she asked. David nodded. "Just one night." Though something in him already knew it might not be that simple. As the night went on, the house became quiet. Eli was asleep in his small bedroom. David sat at the kitchen table, thinking about the girl now wrapped in the blanket in his living room. He didn't know where she came from or why she was alone. But he did know she looked too fragile to survive another night outside. Around midnight, David got up to get a glass of water. As he passed the living room, he saw Lena's small form curled up under the blanket. Her eyes were open, glistening in the dim light. She was trying not to cry, but a tear slid down her cheek. David paused, wanting to say something comforting, but decided against it instead. He quietly draped another blanket over her and walked away. Outside, the wind still roared, but inside, the little house felt warmer. Lena closed her eyes, holding onto the blanket as if it was the only safe thing she had. For the first time in many nights, she felt a tiny spark of hope the next morning. Soft light slipped through the small curtains. David was already awake, making tea in the kitchen. Eli was still in his room, rubbing his eyes as he slowly got out of bed. Lena was the first to appear from the living room. She was already awake, sitting on the couch with the blanket neatly folded beside her. It was as if she wanted no sign she had stayed. Her thin hands rested in her lap, and her eyes moved around the room, quietly studying everything. "Morning," David said gently. She nodded, but didn't speak. Her voice seemed trapped somewhere deep inside her. He noticed she had slept in the same clothes from the night before. Her shoes were worn out, the soles almost gone. David put a cup of warm tea in front of her. "Drink, it will help," he said. She hesitated, then took it with both hands. She sipped slowly, the steam warming her face. Eli came into the kitchen, his hair messy. "Hi, Lena," he said cheerfully. She gave a small nod in reply. David could see his son's natural friendliness trying to break through her walls. But she kept her distance. After tea, David offered her some bread and butter. She ate in silence, always taking small, careful bites, as if she wasn't sure when she would get her next meal. David watched her quietly, wondering what her life had been before she ended up at his door. When breakfast was over, Lena stood and began to gather the dishes. "You don't have to," David told her, but she shook her head. "It's okay. I want to help," she said softly. Her voice was quiet but steady this time. She moved around the kitchen like someone used to working, rinsing the plates and wiping the table. David noticed she avoided meeting his eyes for too long. It wasn't shyness. It was more like she had learned not to trust easily. Eli tried again to talk to her. "Do you like cartoons?" he asked. Lena shrugged. "I don't watch TV," she said. He looked surprised. "Not even once." She shook her head. Her answer was simple, but it carried something heavy. Around mid-morning, David told her she could rest if she wanted, but instead, she asked if she could sweep the floor. He didn't understand why she was trying to work so much. Maybe she thought she had to earn her stay later. Lena went to the small porch to get some fresh air. David watched from the window. She looked tense, her eyes scanning the street. Then suddenly, two men walked past on the other side of the road. They didn't even glance at her. But Lena froze. Her body stiffened, and she stepped back quickly into the shadow of the doorway. David opened the door slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yes, I'm fine." But her trembling hands told another story. When Eli came outside to show her his toy car, Lena forced a smile, but her eyes kept darting toward the street. Something about those men had scared her deeply. David felt a weight in his chest, whatever she was running from. It wasn't small. As the day went on, David offered her the chance to call someone family, maybe? He asked. Lena shook her head firmly. "No, there's no one," she said. Her voice cracked slightly at the end. David didn't ask again. By evening, the air outside had grown colder again. Inside, Lena sat with Eli as he worked on his school drawings. She didn't draw, but she watched him with quiet interest. When he showed her a picture of a house, she smiled faintly. "That's nice," she said. It was the first time David had seen her smile, even if it was small. Before bedtime, David noticed Lena folding her blanket neatly again. "You don't have to do that," he told her. "It's your place for now." She paused, looking at him with a confused expression. "Your place?" she asked. "Yes," David said. "You're safe here." Her lips pressed together as if she wanted to say more, but she stayed silent that night. David stayed awake longer than usual, sitting at the table with a cup of tea. He thought about the way Lena froze when she saw those men, the way she avoided talking about her past. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew it was something dark. In the living room, Lena lay under the blanket, staring at the ceiling. Her body was still, but her mind was restless for the first time in a long while. She was in a warm place with kind people, but the fear inside her wouldn't let go. She whispered softly to herself, as if promising just one more night. Outside, the The wind was calmer than the night before, but a strange feeling hung in the air, as if this was only the beginning of something bigger. David didn't know it yet, but Lena's arrival had already changed the rhythm of his small home, and nothing would ever be the same again. Over the small living room, Lena was already awake. Sitting quietly on the couch, with her knees pulled close to her chest, she had the blanket folded neatly beside her. She didn't want to leave a trace that she had slept there. David stepped out of his bedroom, still stretching his arms after a restless night. He noticed her sitting there, motionless. "You're up early," he said. She nodded, but didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. Eli came running out of his room, full of morning energy. "Lena." "Good morning," he said with a big smile. She gave a small smile back, but it faded quickly. "Morning," she whispered. It was only one word, but it was more than she had said the night before. David went into the kitchen and began to prepare breakfast. The smell of warm bread and tea slowly filled the air. He noticed Lena quietly getting up and coming over. "Can I help?" she asked softly. David hesitated, then nodded. She moved carefully, washing a few dishes from last night and setting the table without being told. When breakfast was ready, they all sat together. Lena ate slowly, like she was still unsure if she could have as much as she wanted. Eli kept talking about his school and his friends, trying to make her laugh. Once he succeeded, just a small, quick laugh that escaped before she could hide it. After breakfast, Lena went to the sink and began washing the dishes again. David said, "You're our guest. You don't have to," but she shook her head. "I want to. It's what I can do," she said. David watched her closely. She moved like someone who had done chores many times before, her hands quick and practiced. She never wasted emotion, but there was something in the way she kept glancing toward the window, as if afraid someone might be watching. Around mid-morning, David asked, "Do you have somewhere you need to be? I can take you." Lena's head dropped slightly. "No, there's nowhere," she replied. Her voice was calm, but her eyes told a different story, one filled with worry. Eli, curious as ever, asked, "Don't you have a family?" Lena froze, her hands still in the dishwater. After a long pause, she said, "Not anymore." David wanted to ask more, but he could feel how heavy those words were for her, so he stayed quiet. Later, Lena went outside to sweep the small porch. The air was crisp but sunny. David was in the kitchen fixing a loose chair leg when he heard the broom stop. He glanced out and saw Lena standing very still, staring down the street. Two men were walking by, talking to each other. They didn't look at her, but she quickly stepped back into the doorway, her eyes wide. David walked outside. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. Yes, but her voice was tight when the men were gone. She let out a breath she had been holding. She forced a smile. When Eli came out with his toy car, "Want to see?" he asked. She knelt down to look, pretending to be interested. But David could see her mind was far away. That afternoon, David noticed something else. Lena barely ever relaxed. Even when sitting, her shoulders stayed tense. She avoided talking about herself, and whenever the conversation got close to her past, she would change the subject. As evening came, the air grew colder again. David made soup for dinner. They sat together, and this time Lena ate a little faster, maybe starting to trust that there would be more food if she wanted. Eli told her a silly story from school that made her smile for longer than before. Before bed, Lena folded her blanket again and placed it neatly on the couch. "You can leave it," David told her. "It's yours while you're here." She paused and gave him a long look. "You mean I can stay?" she asked quietly. David nodded. "Yes, until you're ready to go." Her eyes softened, but she didn't say anything more. That night, David sat at the kitchen table, thinking about how quickly she had become part of their small home, but he also knew something was wrong, something she wasn't telling him. In the living room, Lena lay down again, staring at the ceiling. The warmth of the blanket and the faint hum of the heater felt comforting. But her mind was full of shadows. She thought about the people she feared might find her, and wondered if she could really be safe here. For now, she decided to believe David's words. She closed her eyes, holding on to the thought that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could stay longer than one night. The days that followed felt different for David and Eli. Lena was still quiet, still cautious, but something had shifted. She no longer stood at the edge of the room like a shadow. Instead, she began to be part of the little life inside the old house. David had told himself she would only stay 1 or 2 nights, yet every morning when he saw her sitting at the table drinking tea in silence, he felt less and less willing to imagine the house without her. Eli seemed to feel the same. He had decided, in his own way, that Lena was his friend. On the 3rd morning, Lena joined David in the backyard while he repaired an old wooden chair to sell. She didn't just watch. She picked up a rag and began wiping dust from the other chairs without being asked. "You don't have to," David said. But she simply replied, "I want to help." Her voice was quiet, but it carried a little more strength than before. By the afternoon, Eli was tugging her toward the small park nearby. "Come on, it's fun," he said. Lena hesitated, glancing around as if measuring the risks, but finally agreed. At the park, she sat on a bench while Eli ran around, laughing. David noticed that her eyes kept following the path and scanning the street, as if expecting someone. When Eli begged her to try the swings, she shook her head. "I don't know how," she said. His eyes widened. "What?" "It's easy. I'll push you." She gave in, and for a moment, as she swung forward and back, her face lit up with a small laugh. It was a laugh that seemed to surprise even her. That night, they had dinner together. The food was simple: bread, soup, and some leftover vegetables, but Lena ate without the slow caution she had before. Eli told stories about school, and David noticed how Lena's shoulders relaxed a little more each time. Later, when David stepped outside to bring in firewood, he overheard a sound from the living room. It was Lena's voice, low but warm. She was telling Eli about a stray dog she once fed behind a market. She didn't say where or when, but it was the first time she had shared anything personal. But just as things felt lighter, a shadow returned. The next evening, Lena went to take out the trash. The moment she opened the door, she froze. Down the street, faint voices called her name. She stepped back quickly and shut the door, locking it. Her hands were trembling when David came into the hallway. "What happened?" he asked. She shook her head. Nothing, but her eyes told another story. When Eli had gone to bed, Lena approached David in the kitchen. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. "If they come, please don't let them take me." David felt something cold settle in his chest. He nodded. "I won't." But he knew they were no longer just helping a lost child. They were protecting her from something real, something dangerous. The next day, David decided not to leave her alone. He took her with him when he went to the market. At first, she kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. But when Eli handed her an apple and said, "It's sweet, try it," she took a small bite, and for a second, Kay softened. In the evenings, the 3 of them began sitting together by the heater. Eli would draw pictures. Lena would sometimes help, and David would work on small repairs for extra money. Slowly, the silence between them began to feel less like distance and more like comfort. One night, Lena stood in the doorway of the kitchen while David washed the dishes. "Thank you," she said quietly. He turned. "For what?" She looked down. "For letting me stay, and for not asking too many questions." David smiled faintly. "You'll tell me when you're ready," he said. She didn't answer, but her eyes held a hint of relief. Still, he couldn't ignore the feeling that time was running short. Whoever she was hiding from might already be looking, and soon they would have to decide how far they were willing to go to keep her safe. That night, Lena lay under her blanket, listening to the faint hum of the heater. She thought about the park, the swings, and Eli's laugh. She thought about David's steady voice when he promised not to let anyone take her. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something close to safety, but deep inside, a part of her still whispered, "Safety never lasts forever." Long shadows across the small front yard. David was in the kitchen fixing a loose drawer while Eli sat on the floor building a tower with wooden blocks. Lena was on the couch, quietly stitching a tear in one of Eli's old shirts. It was a peaceful moment, the kind that made the house feel like a real home. Then came the sound of a car pulling up outside. It was slow, deliberate. The hum of the engine stopped right in front of the house. David's hands paused. He wasn't expecting anyone. Lena's head lifted sharply. Her fingers froze on the needle and thread. A shadow passed over her face. She set the shirt down, her breathing uneven. A firm knock echoed through the door. Eli looked up curiously. "Who is it?" he asked, but Lena was already standing, her eyes wide. She moved toward the corner of the room. Almost hiding herself, David went to the door and opened it just enough to see two people standing outside. A man and a woman, both dressed in neat, expensive clothes. The man wore a dark coat, his hair slicked back. The woman's eyes were sharp and calculating. "Good afternoon," the man said smoothly. "We're here for the girl. Her name is Lena." David's grip on the door tightened. "And you are?" he asked. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're her legal guardians." She wandered off. "We've been worried sick." Behind him, Lena whispered, "No. Please." Her voice trembled, and David felt her fear, like a cold wind. He stepped slightly to block their view of her. "She's safe here," he said firmly. "If you're her guardians, you can speak with the police. I'll make a call right now." The man's smile thinned. "There's no need to involve anyone. We can take her now. It'll be easier for everyone." David shook his head. "Not without proof," he said. His voice was calm but firm. The woman's eyes flicked past him, trying to spot Lena inside. "You don't understand," she said in a low tone. "She belongs with us." David didn't move. "She belongs where she's safe," he replied, and began closing the door. The man leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "Be careful who you protect. Sometimes it's better to stay out of other people's business." David shut the door with a sharp click and locked it. Lena stood frozen, her hands trembling. "They can't take me, right?" she asked in a voice so small it almost broke. David knelt in front of her. "Not without going through the police. I won't let them just take you." Eli looked between them, confused but sensing the tension. "Dad, what's happening?" David gave him a reassuring pat. "It's okay, buddy. Everything's fine." Though his own heart was pounding, that night David called the local police station to report the visit. He explained what happened and gave a description of the man and woman. The officer said they would make a note of it and advised him to be careful. Later, after Eli had gone to bed, David found a small folded piece of paper slipped under the front door. His stomach tightened as he unfolded it. The words were written. In neat, cold handwriting, "She belongs to us. Stay out of it." He showed it to Lena. Her face went pale. She hugged herself tightly. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They'll keep coming." David placed the note in his pocket. "Then we'll be ready," he said. Over the next few days, David noticed Lena staying closer to the house. She no longer asked to go to the park. She avoided the windows. Her laughter with Eli became rare again, replaced by quiet, distant looks. David knew they couldn't live in fear forever. He contacted a social worker he trusted, explaining Lena's situation as much as he knew. The social worker agreed to visit and speak with her, but warned that the process to protect her legally might take time. That evening, while Lena was helping Eli with his drawings, David caught her glancing at the door several times. Her hands moved over the paper, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. When Eli went to bed, David sat with her at the table. "Lena, whatever they did to you, you're not alone now," he said gently. Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what they're like," she whispered, "if they take me back. I won't come back here again." David reached across the table, his voice steady. "Then I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that doesn't happen." For the first time in days, she looked at him without fear, but with something like hope. She didn't say thank you, but the way her shoulders eased told him the words were there, even if unspoken. Outside, the night was quiet, but David knew the calm could break at any moment. The past had found its way to his doorstep, and it wasn't going to leave without a fight. The following morning, David woke earlier than usual. The memory of the note slipped under his door kept circling in his mind. He had always tried to avoid trouble, to keep life simple for him and Eli. But now, trouble had arrived whether he wanted it or not. And a frightened girl was depending on him. Lena was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She looked pale and tired, like she hadn't slept much. Eli sat beside her, drawing. In his notebook, his innocent chatter filled the room, but Lena barely spoke. Her eyes stayed on the table. David made up his mind. "Lena, we're going to talk to someone today," he said. She looked up quickly. "Who?" she asked. "A social worker I know," David replied. "She can help keep you safe." Lena hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. What if they find out? What if they get angry? David leaned forward. "Then they'll have to deal with me." His voice was steady, and for a moment, Lena's tense shoulders eased. By midday, the social worker, Ms. Carter, arrived. She was a kind-faced woman in her 50s, with warm eyes and a calm voice. She spoke gently to Lena, asking simple questions. Lena answered some, but stayed quiet on others, especially when asked about the man and woman. "It's okay, Ms. Carter reassured her. "You don't have to tell me everything today. What matters is that you're somewhere safe, and we'll work to keep it that way." After she left, David felt a little relief, but it was short-lived. In the evening, while Eli was doing homework, there was another knock at the door. This time, David opened it to find the man from before, alone. His smile was gone, replaced by something colder. "You shouldn't have called the police," the man said quietly. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." David stood firm in the doorway. "Leave now," he said. The man's lips curled into a half-smile. "You think you can protect her forever?" he asked. "People like you can't fight people like us." David didn't answer. He simply closed the door and locked it. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. When he turned around, he saw Lena standing in the hallway. Her face was pale. "It's him, isn't it?" she whispered. David nodded. "But he's not taking you anywhere." That night, David kept the lights low and stayed near the front window, watching the street. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. If they came back, he would call the police immediately. The next day, he decided to take action. He went to the police station with Lena and filed a formal request for protection. He explained the visits, the note, and the threats. The officer took his statement seriously and promised to send patrol cars through the neighborhood. Lena stayed quiet the whole time, but when they stepped outside, she looked at David and said softly, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Back at home, David started making changes. He added an extra lock to the front door, moved the couch away from the window so Lena wouldn't feel exposed, and told Eli to always stay inside unless he or Lena was with him. One afternoon, while David was fixing a broken lamp, Lena came to him holding a small paper. It was one of Eli's drawings, a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a roof. Eli said, "This is us," she said, her voice cracked. David took the drawing, smiling faintly. "Then that's what we are," that evening. They all sat together for dinner. Lena seemed lighter, even laughing once when Eli made a silly joke. But David knew the danger hadn't passed. They were. In a calm moment, but it was only temporary. 2 nights later, the phone rang. David answered, and a deep, unfamiliar voice said, "You've been warned, don't make us come inside." Then the line went dead. David stood in silence for a moment before hanging up. He didn't tell Lena about the call. But he became even more watchful. He kept a flashlight and his phone by his bed, ready to dial the police. The fear in the house was real, but so was the bond forming between them. David had already decided, no matter how much trouble it brought, he would not let Lena go back to the life she came from. That night, before going to bed, Lena stopped at the kitchen door where David was washing dishes. "I don't know why." "You're doing all this for me," she said softly. David looked at her, "Because someone has to." She didn't reply, but her eyes glistened as she turned away. For the first time in years, she felt like someone was truly standing up for her, and she didn't want to lose that. Warming the small living room, Lena sat at the table with Eli, helping him with his math homework. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. And for once, she looked at peace. David stood in the kitchen, quietly watching them. It had been 2 weeks since the last knock at the door. 2 weeks of cautious hope. Patrol cars passed through the street more often now, and the man and woman had not returned. David knew it. Might be the calm before the storm, but he also knew they were closer to safety than ever before. That afternoon, the phone rang. David answered and heard Miss Carter's steady voice. "Good news, David. The court reviewed Lena's case. The couple has no legal right to her. If she wants, she can stay with you." David's breath caught for a moment. "Are you sure?" He asked. "Yes," Miss Carter said warmly. "It's official as of this morning." David hung up slowly, his mind racing. He stepped into the living room. Lena and Eli looked up. "Everything okay?" Lena asked. David took a breath. "It's more than okay, the court says. You can stay here for as long as you want." For a moment, Lena didn't react. She blinked, as if she hadn't heard him right. "Stay forever," she whispered. David nodded. "Forever, if you want." Her lips trembled, and her eyes filled with tears. She glanced at Eli, who grinned and shouted, "Yes. I told you you're part of the family." Lena covered her mouth with both hands, trying to stop herself from crying, but the tears came anyway. David moved closer. Speaking softly, "No one is taking you back. Not now, not ever." Lena stepped forward and hugged him suddenly. It was the first time she had ever initiated a hug. Her arms were tight around him, and he could feel how much this meant. The rest of the day felt lighter. Lena helped David in the garden, pulling weeds and planting a few small flowers. Eli played nearby. Every so often, Lena would glance at David with a shy smile, like she was still testing the idea that this was truly her home. That evening, they had a small dinner to celebrate. David bought a loaf of fresh bread, some roasted chicken, and even a small cake. "This is for you," he told Lena, "to welcome you home." She stared at the cake for a long moment before whispering, "No one's ever done something like this for me." After dinner, Eli brought out the drawing he had made weeks earlier, the one with 3 stick figures under a roof. But now, he had added more detail. The stick figures had smiles. The roof had flowers on it, and above it all, he had written in large letters, "Family." Lena laughed through her tears. "That's perfect," she said. She placed the drawing on the wall above the couch. "Now it's official," Eli declared proudly. Later that night, after Eli was asleep, Lena sat on the couch with David. The heater hummed softly in the corner. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You don't have to." David replied, "Just live your life. Be happy. That's all." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I will." Outside. The night was cold, but the little house was warm. Lena lay down under her blanket. Though now she didn't fold it neatly to hide her presence, she let it stay messy. Because this was her place now. Her heart was lighter than it had been in years. David stood at the doorway for a moment, watching her drift to sleep. He remembered the first night he saw her, shivering on the doorstep. Eyes filled with fear. Now, she looked peaceful, safe, like she finally belonged. For David, it wasn't just about helping a stranger anymore. It was about family, about standing up when it would have been easier to turn away, about choosing to love when the world told you to stay out of it. The house was still small, the money still tight. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that three people who had once been alone in their own ways now had each other, and from that day forward, Lena never again asked, just for one night. She was home.